Hello and welcome to Perspectives Part 2 from Topic 1 Foundations for the Environmental Systems and Societies course for the IB Diploma. So, our perspectives depend on how we stand. So I thought this was quite a nice image. A Buddhist monk standing in a Buddhist temple in Korea. Where do they stand? What's their worldview? Yeah, what's their worldview? What affects their worldview? So, worldviews are lenses through which we view the world, and they're affected by a lot of inputs, a lot of things that actually act on us, such as experience, culture, economics, religious and education. But each of us holds a unique worldview. And we hold unique worldviews about a lot of things, But in this, we're looking at worldviews in terms of an environmental worldview. Okay, so we have an individual environmental worldview, but we share some of our worldview maybe with other people in a group. And we maybe share some of that with many people in different groups, but ultimately our worldview is individual. Now, this being an IB course, let's think of that in terms of TOK. These environmental worldviews are sorts of like communities of knowers. In TOK we've got me as a knower, but we've got an individual worldview. And we share our knowledge with communities of knowers as we share some of our environmental worldview with groups of other people. And ultimately we share different knowledge with communities of knowers, and we share parts of our worldview with many other individuals. How do we get there though? So what makes this different or similar? How do we get there? Is the worldview, the environmental worldview of a 16-year-old girl living in Germany in a rural village going to be the same as a 16-year-old boy living in Singapore? Is it likely to be similar, or is it going to be different from a 55-year-old American executive who works for an oil company? Or what's going to be similar or different with a 45-year-old Himba woman from Namibia in Africa? So we each have individual things that are affected by the inputs around us, by our culture, by our groups, by our religion. So what might each worldview be like for each person? What are the differences that might shape these views? What are things in their life that may shape each of them? That's the way to think about these environmental worldviews. And we can sort of model them. Like most things in environmental systems and societies, we can create a model of what this maybe looks like. So how are our environmental values? Because what we're talking about is value questions. How are our values created? Well, we've got the inputs. We've got experience, we've got culture, we've got economics, we've got education. We've got many other things as well. And then we've got processes. And we process that inside ourselves. We think, we reflect on those things, and they end up as an output. And our output is obviously our environmental value, where we stand. But environmental values are not static. There's a range of environmental values. And so there's this spectrum of environmental worldviews, our environmental values, that go from one end where consideration of nature is most important to another end where maybe technology overrules everything. And we can sort of frame that in three big groups: ecocentrism, ecocentric viewpoints; anthropocentrism, an anthropocentric viewpoint; and technocentrism, a technocentric viewpoint. And obviously ecocentrism connects more with nature, anthropocentrism connects with people, and technocentrism obviously connects with technology. So what would people maybe look like? What would their viewpoint be if they fitted in each of these broad categories? Well, ecocentrists would tend to have a holistic worldview. Minimum disturbance to nature. Anthropocentrics were people as managers, where we manage the environment for sustainability, for instance, which we'll come on to later. Technocentrics, well, technocentrism says that technology can keep pace with any change that we do. The technology will eventually provide an answer. And these ideas were put forward by a guy called O'Riordan in 1981. So they're not new ideas, they're quite established ideas. But it's a spectrum, and it's a little bit more complex. So We could look at it from the lens of a deep ecologist, soft ecologists, environmental managers, and cornucopians. These sort of straddle these three. So we've now introduced into three broad categories, four narrower categories. And the deep ecologists, intrinsic importance of nature. Nature's more important than humanity. Cornucopians, belief that you can always find a way out of difficulties. They're the two extremes that we have. Yeah. Whereas in the middle we have an emphasis on smallness. The soft ecologists tend to emphasize the smallness of scale. Community is better than individuals. Yeah. And environmental managers, a belief that economic growth and resources can be controlled. Yeah. And these are built on earlier foundations. So in the 18th century, Jean-Jacques Rousseau suggested something called Romanticism. Later on in the 18th century, a British guy, Jeremy Bentham, suggested an idea called utilitarianism. Then in the early 20th century, Aldo Leopold suggested this idea called stewardship. And Alfred Crosby looked at the idea of imperialism. And we can think of those as maybe our deep ecology, our soft ecology, our managerialism, and our cornucopian viewpoints. So let's look at each in turn, and we'll start with stewardship. So, stewardship suggests that humans have responsibilities for the environment, and that therefore we can manage it, and that we need to give it respect, but we can also manage it for our benefit. The Romantics, well, humans are aesthetic and beautiful and unadulterated. The Romantics sort of fit with the deep ecologists, that nature is beautiful, therefore we should do everything we can to preserve that beauty. The Imperialists, on the other hand, well, they've suggested that science can be used to control nature. And the Utilitarians, well, they've suggested that our actions and outcomes can produce both good and bad. So again, by managing the environment but respecting nature, we can actually get the best good. Yeah, so that's another way of looking at it. That's another model. And then finally for today, we've got a range of models. This is from Burr and Ritter in 2000, and they were looking at environmental philosophies, these environmental values, within the lenses of feminism. Yeah, and we can look, the neoclassical economics would be the sort of imperialists. The liberalism is the utilitarianism. The social ecology, those are the stewards. And the deep ecologists, those are the romantics. Yeah, these sort of match up with that. But they've added a new one, ecofeminism. So these ideas of our values are not static. They change, and they change for us as well. Yeah, our values can change over time. What affects our values right now? Things like social media. How does social media affect our values at this moment? What is it within social media that is making big changes for us? How is social media changing the way that we think about things? Yeah, so there's lots to think about, and the entire course will hang on these ideas of our environmental values, because it will inform how we look at different parts of the course as we go on. So finally, to finish off, the work cited is there. There's a link to the website to support everything. So thanks a lot, and tune in for the next one.